The snow fell hard that night, and Marcus Chun could barely see 10 feet in front of his truck as he drove down the lonely mountain road in Alaska. He had lived alone at the Wildlife Research Station for 3 years now, and he was used to the silence and the cold and the endless white that covered everything in winter. Marcus was a veterinarian who studied wolves and bears and other wild animals that lived in this remote place. And he loved his work, even though it meant being far from other people. The radio in his truck played old country music, and he hummed along as he drove back from the small town where he had picked up supplies for the month ahead. That was when he saw the light. It was not like any light he had ever seen before. A strange blue glow that cut through the snowstorm. Like a knife through butter. Marcus stopped his truck and stared at the light for a long moment, his heart beating fast in his chest. He knew he should probably keep driving and mind his own business, but something inside him said that he needed to investigate. He grabbed his flashlight and his medical bag from the back seat, because a good veterinarian always carried supplies for emergencies. And he stepped out into the freezing wind. The snow crunched under his boots as he walked toward the blue glow. And with each step, the light grew brighter and stranger. When he finally reached the source, Marcus felt his legs go weak beneath him. There was a ship buried in the snow, a vessel made of metal that gleamed like silver, even in the dim light. And it was shaped like nothing he had ever seen in any airplane or helicopter. This was not from Earth, he realized, and the thought made his hand shake as he moved closer. The ship had crashed hard, and one side was torn open like a wounded animal, with strange sparks flying from broken wires inside. Marcus knew he should run. He knew he should call someone. But then he heard a sound that changed everything. It was a cry of pain, weak and desperate, coming from inside the wrecked vessel. He did not think any more after that. He just moved, climbing through the torn metal and into the ship without caring about the danger inside. The air smelled like burning and something sweet that he could not identify. Emergency lights flickered red and blue along the walls, and strange symbols flashed on screens that he could not read. And there, lying on the floor in a pool of violet liquid that had to be blood, was a woman, but she was not human. Her skin was silver like moonlight on water, and her body was tall and thin in ways that no human body could be. Strange markings covered her arms and face, markings that glowed faintly with soft blue light. Though that light was growing dimmer with each passing second, her eyes were large and dark, like pools of black water, and when she saw Marcus, those eyes filled with terror. She tried to move away from him, dragging herself across the floor despite her injuries. And she made sounds that might have been words in a language he did not understand. Marcus held up his hands to show he meant no harm, and he spoke to her in the same soft voice he used with frightened animals. "Hey there. It is okay," he said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you, I promise. I just want to help." She stopped moving and stared at him with those huge dark eyes, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. Marcus could see now that her leg was badly broken. The bone bent at a terrible angle beneath her silver skin. He had treated many broken legs in his career, in wolves and dogs and deer, and he knew that this creature needed help right now, or she would not survive. He moved slowly toward her, narrating everything he did the way he always did with scared animals. "I'm just going to look at your leg now. Okay, I am a doctor, well, a doctor for animals, but I think I can help you too." She flinched when he touched her, but she did not try to run again. Her skin was cool beneath his fingers, cooler than human skin. And up close, he could see that the glowing markings on her body pulsed weakly like a fading heartbeat. Marcus opened his medical bag and got to work. He had splinted hundreds of broken bones in his life, and though this leg was longer and thinner than anything he had worked on before, the basic principles were the same. He talked to her the whole time, keeping his voice calm and steady, even though his mind was screaming that he was treating an actual alien from outer space. "You are going to be all right," he told her as he wrapped the splint around her leg. "I know this hurts, but I need you to stay still for me." She watched him with an expression he could not read, her dark eyes following his every movement when he finished with the leg. He checked her other wounds and found several deep cuts along her arms and side. He cleaned them as best he could with the supplies he had. And he noticed that her violet blood did not flow the same way human blood did. It was thicker, almost like syrup. And it seemed to clot faster than he expected. That was probably a good thing, he thought, because she had lost a lot of blood already when he had done everything he could inside the ship. Marcus knew he needed to get her somewhere warm. The temperature was dropping fast, and the wrecked vessel offered little protection from the cold. "I'm going to carry you to my cabin," he said, not knowing if she understood a single word. "It is warm there, and I have food and medicine, and you will be safe." He lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she was despite her height, and he carried her out into the snow. She made a small sound of pain as the cold wind hit her skin, and she turned her face against his chest like a child seeking comfort. Marcus walked through the storm with the alien woman in his arms, his boots sinking deep into the snow with every step. His cabin was only a mile away, but in this weather, it felt like 100 miles. He kept talking to her the whole time, telling her about his work and his cabin and his family back in California. Anything to keep her awake and focused. When they finally reached the cabin, Marcus kicked open the door and carried her inside to the warmth. He laid her down on his bed and covered her with every blanket he owned. And then he built up the fire until the room was almost too hot. She lay there watching him with those dark eyes, her silver skin slowly warming, the glowing markings on her body growing just a little bit brighter. Marcus pulled up a chair beside the bed and sat down heavily, finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion and shock that he had been pushing away. He had just rescued an alien being from a crashed spaceship, and now she was lying in his bed in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. He did not know what to do next. He did not know who to call. He did not know if more of her kind would come looking for her. But as he watched her eyes slowly close in sleep, her breathing becoming deep and even, Marcus knew that he had made the right choice. She had needed help, and he had helped her. And that was the only thing that mattered right now. He stayed awake all night, watching over her like he had watched over so many injured animals before. And sometime in the dark hours before dawn, she opened her eyes and looked at him, and she spoke a single word in a voice like wind chimes. "Why?" Marcus understood that word. Somehow she had found it in whatever translation system her people used. And it was the only word she needed to ask. Why had he helped her? Why had he risked himself for a stranger? Why had he shown kindness when he could have walked away? He thought about the question for a long moment, and then he gave her the only answer he had. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "And I was there. That is all." She stared at him for a long time, and something changed in those dark alien eyes, something that looked almost like wonder. Then she closed her eyes again and slept. And Marcus sat beside her through the night, a human man watching over a visitor from the stars. 7 days had passed since the night Marcus found the alien woman in the snow. And in that time, his whole world had changed in ways he never could have imagined. Her name was Velith Sindara, and she came from a planet so far away that the light from Earth's sun had not yet reached her. Homeworld, she had learned to speak English with surprising speed, using a small device she had salvaged from her crashed ship that somehow put words directly into her mind. At first, she spoke only in broken phrases, simple words strung together without grace. But each day, her speech grew stronger and more fluid. Marcus learned that she was a navigator, a pilot of starships who had traveled to hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. Her ship had been attacked by pirates near a place she called the Void Corridor, and she had barely escaped by making an emergency jump through something she called fold space. The jump had torn her ship apart, and dropped her on this planet. A world that was not even supposed to exist according to her star maps. Your planet is not in our records, Velith told him one morning as she sat by the fire. Her broken leg propped up on pillows Marcus had arranged for her. We call such places ghost worlds. Planets that hide themselves from the galaxy. Marcus smiled at that and poured her another cup of the herbal tea she had grown to enjoy. Maybe the galaxy just has not found us yet, he said. We are pretty far out here in the middle of nowhere. Velith looked at him with those large dark eyes that still sometimes made his heart skip a beat. You do not understand, she said quietly. The galaxy is full of species who would see your world and want to take it. Your resources, your people. Everything you have would be valuable to those who deal in such things. Marcus sat down across from her and thought about her words. Are your people like that? He asked. Evleth was silent for a long moment before she answered. My people are merchants, she said finally. We trade in goods and services across 100 systems. And everything we do is based on debt and payment. That is the way of the Karathi. Everything must balance. She looked at her healing leg and then back at Marcus with an expression he had come to recognize as confusion. I do not understand you, she admitted. You saved my life. You brought me into your home. You feed me and care for me, and yet you ask for nothing in return. Among my people, this would be madness. Marcus shrugged the way he always did when people made too big a deal of his kindness. Where I come from? We help people because it is the right thing to do, he said. My grandfather used to tell me a story about when he was young and poor. His car broke down on the side of the road, and he thought he was going to freeze. But then a stranger stopped and helped him fix it and refused any payment. He smiled at the memory of his grandfather's voice telling that old tale. When my grandfather tried to give the man money, the man just said, Today you, tomorrow me. And then he drove away. My grandfather spent the rest of his life helping strangers because of that one moment. Velith repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them. Today you, tomorrow me, she said. This is a strange philosophy. It assumes that kindness will come back to you someday. But what if it never does? What if you spend your whole life giving and never receiving? Marcus thought about that question seriously before he answered. And I guess you still lived a good life, he said. Helping people is not about getting something back. It is about being the kind of person you want to be. Velith stared at him for a long time, and those glowing marks on her skin pulsed with colors he had not seen before. Soft greens and warm golds mixing with the usual blue. Our scholars have theories about species like yours, she said softly. Species that practice what they call unreciprocated altruism, kindness with no expectation of return. Most believe such species cannot exist because evolution should eliminate such behavior. She reached out and touched his hand with her cool silver fingers. Yet here you are, she said. A living impossibility. The days continued to pass. And Marcus fell into a routine of caring for Velith while still doing his work at the research station, showed her his equipment, and explained what he studied. And she listened with genuine interest, even though the technology must have seemed primitive to her one afternoon. Marcus found an injured wolf near the edge of the forest. A young female with a leg caught in an old trap that some illegal hunter had left behind. He brought the wolf back to the station and worked for hours to free her leg and treat the wound. All while Velith watched from her chair by the window. You treat animals with the same care you showed me, she observed when he was finished. Marcus washed the blood from his hands and smiled. Tiredly, all living things deserve kindness, he said. That wolf did not ask to step in that trap. She was just living her life. And now she has a chance to keep living it. Velith was quiet for the rest of the day, but Marcus caught her watching him with that wondering expression several times. That night, Velith developed a fever. Her skin grew hot instead of cool, and the glowing marks on her body flickered wildly like flames in a strong wind. Marcus sat beside her bed all through the dark hours, pressing cold claws to her forehead and holding her hand when she cried out in her sleep. Did not know if his treatments would work on her alien physiology, but he did everything he could think of to bring her temperature down. "Stay with me," he whispered to her in the darkest part of the night. "You did not crash on my planet just to die in my cabin. You hear me? You are going to be okay." She mumbled words in her own language, words he could not understand, and her fingers gripped his hand tightly as if he were an anchor in a storm by morning. The fever had broken. Velith opened her eyes and looked at Marcus, who had not slept at all and had dark circles under his eyes. "You stayed with me," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Of course I did," Marcus replied. "That is what you do when someone is sick. You stay with them." Velith turned her face away, and Marcus thought he saw something like tears sliding down her silver cheeks. Though he could not be sure if her kind even cried the way humans did. "I have traveled to many worlds," she said quietly. "I have met many species, and I have never encountered anything like you. Your kindness frightens me." Marcus frowned at that unexpected admission. "Why would kindness frighten you?" he asked. Velith turned back to face him, and her dark eyes were filled with an emotion he could not name. "Because I do not know how to repay it," she said. "Among my people, an unpaid debt is the greatest shame. It follows you forever. It marks you as someone who cannot be trusted. And yet, you have saved my life and nursed me through fever and asked for nothing." She gripped his hand tighter, her cool fingers wrapped around his warm ones. "How do I balance a debt that has no price?" she asked. Marcus thought about her question, and then he leaned forward and spoke to her gently. "Here's the secret," he said. "There is no debt. I did not help you because I wanted something. I helped you because you needed help. That is the beginning and the end of it." He squeezed her hand and smiled. "But if you really need to do something, then take this lesson with you when you leave. Be kind to someone else someday. Help a stranger who cannot pay you back. That is how this works." Velith looked at him for a long time, and something shifted in her expression. Something that looked almost like understanding. "Today me," she whispered. "Tomorrow someone else." Marcus nodded, and for the first time since she crashed on his planet, Velith smiled. It was a strange smile on her alien face, with her silver lips and her glowing marks, but it was beautiful too. And Marcus found himself smiling back at her outside the cabin. The wolf he had rescued howled in the distance, healthy again and running free, and somewhere in the stars above, Velith's people were searching for their lost daughter, though neither she nor Marcus knew it yet. 12 days after the crash, the sky above Marcus Chun's cabin turned bright as day in the middle of the night, woke to a sound like thunder that shook the walls of his small home and sent books tumbling from their shelves. Velith was already awake, standing at the window with her weight balanced carefully on her healing leg, and the glow of her markings was brighter than he had ever seen them. "They found me," she said, and her voice held emotions that Marcus could not quite identify. Relief and fear and something else all mixed together. Marcus joined her at the window and watched as a massive ship descended from the sky. A vessel so large that it blocked out the stars above the mountain. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, all smooth silver curves and glowing blue lights. And it made Velith's crashed ship look like a toy by comparison. "Your people?" Marcus Velith nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the descending ship. "That is a Sindara rescue vessel," she said. "My family must have sent every ship they had to search for me." The Sindara did not abandon their own. Before Marcus could respond, the front door of the cabin burst open with a crash of splintered wood-armed soldiers poured into the small space. Tall, silver-skinned beings like Velith, but with harder faces and eyes that held no warmth. They wore armor that gleamed in the firelight, and they carried weapons that hummed with energy. Marcus could feel in his teeth one of the soldiers shouted something in the Karathi language. And suddenly Marcus found himself slammed against the wall with a weapon pointed at his face. He had never felt so small in his entire life. Surrounded by these towering alien warriors who looked at him like he was an insect. "Stop," Velith commanded, and her voice carried an authority that Marcus had never heard before. She stepped forward despite her injured leg, and the markings on her skin blazed with brilliant light. "Stand down," she ordered. "This human is not a threat. He saved my life." The soldiers hesitated, looking at each other with uncertainty. Then a new figure entered the cabin. Another Karathi woman who wore robes instead of armor. Her silver face marked with the same glowing patterns as Velith, but in different arrangements. "Navigator Sindara," the woman said formally, "we are relieved to find you alive. Your father has been searching every system between here and the Void Corridor." Velith's expression softened slightly at the mention of her father, but her voice remained firm. "Commander Rithis, I ordered your soldiers to stand down. This human is under my protection." The commander looked at Marcus with open curiosity, studying him the way a scientist might study a new specimen. "A human?" She repeated, "I have never heard of this species. What world is this?" "The locals call it Earth," Velith answered. "It is not in our databases. A ghost world on the edge of map space." One of the soldiers made a sound that might have been a laugh. "A primitive, then," he said with contempt. "Look at this dwelling. They have not even discovered basic energy shielding. What could such a creature possibly do to help a Sindara?" Marcus watched the soldier speaking and felt a flash of anger. But he kept his mouth shut because he was not stupid enough to argue with someone holding a weapon that could probably vaporize him. Velith, however, had no such restraint. She turned to the soldier with fire in her dark eyes, and her markings flared so bright that the soldier actually stepped back. "This primitive creature," she said, her voice cold as the snow outside, "found me dying in my wrecked ship. He splinted my broken leg with nothing but basic tools and his own knowledge. He carried me through a blizzard to his home. He nursed me through fever and stayed awake through the night to make sure I lived." She moved closer to the soldier, and despite her injury, she seemed suddenly dangerous. "He did all of this asking nothing in return," she continued. "No payment, no contract, no debt negotiation. Just kindness for its own sake. Can you say the same of your service, soldier? Or do you help only those who pay?" The soldier's face flushed with embarrassment, and he looked away from Velith's burning gaze. Commander Rithis cleared her throat and stepped forward. "Navigator Sindara, your father is waiting aboard the ship. He is most anxious to see you alive and well." Velith nodded but did not immediately move toward the door. Instead, she turned to Marcus, and her expression softened into something almost tender. "You must come with us," she said. "I will explain everything to my father. He will want to thank you properly." Marcus looked around his ruined cabin, at the broken door and the scattered belongings and the alien soldiers who still watched him with suspicious eyes. "I think I will stay here," he said quietly. "This is my home, and I have work to do." Velith's face showed something like pain at his words. "The galaxy is not kind," she said. "Now that we have found this world, others will follow. Pirates, slavers, those who would take what they want without asking. You cannot protect yourself against what is coming." Marcus smiled the tired smile of a man who had seen too much in one night. "That sounds like a problem for tomorrow," he said. "Tonight I just want to fix my door and get some sleep." Commander Rithis made an impatient sound. "Navigator, we must leave. The longer we stay in uncharted space, the greater the risk." Velith looked at Marcus for a long moment, and something passed between them that neither could put into words. Then she stepped forward and placed her hand over his heart, pressing her cool palm against his chest in a gesture that felt both intimate and formal. "Among my people, "This is how we mark a debt that cannot be repaid," she explained. "Your kindness is written here now, in a place that no one can take from you." She held his gaze with those dark alien eyes. "You will see me again, Marcus Chen," she promised. "A Sindara always balances the ledger, and I have a very large debt to pay." Before he could respond, she turned and walked out of the cabin. Her injured leg barely slowing her down, the soldiers filed out after her, and Commander Rethus paused at the broken doorway to look back at Marcus one last time. "You are either very brave or very foolish," she said. "I cannot decide which." Then she too was gone, and Marcus stood alone in his damaged cabin as the sound of the ship's engines grew louder outside. He walked to the window and watched the massive vessel rise into the sky, carrying Velith back to her people and her life among the stars. Within moments, it had disappeared, leaving only the normal darkness of an Alaskan winter night. Marcus looked around at the mess the soldiers had made and let out a long, slow breath. Part of him wondered if he had dreamed the whole thing, if the past 12 days had been some kind of fever dream brought on by too much time alone in the wilderness. But the broken door was real, and the cold wind blowing through it was real, and the memory of Velith's hand on his heart was very real. Indeed, he spent the rest of the night making temporary repairs, and as dawn began to brighten the eastern sky, he finally allowed himself to sit down and think about what had happened. An alien woman had crashed on his planet, and he had saved her life. And now she was gone, and everything was supposed to go back to normal. But Marcus knew that nothing would ever be normal again. Had seen proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. And more than that, he had been told that the universe was a dangerous place full of creatures who would see Earth as prey. Sleep came eventually, though it was filled with dreams of silver skin and dark eyes, and ships that sailed between the stars. And when he woke the next morning, Marcus went back to his work tracking wolves and studying the wildlife of the Alaskan wilderness, because that was what he did. That was who he was, and aliens or no aliens, the work still needed to be done. Days passed, then a week, then more. The world kept turning and the snow kept falling, and Marcus began to wonder if Velith's promise had just been words spoken in the heat of the moment. Perhaps the Sindara had more important things to do than remember one primitive human on a ghost world at the edge of nowhere. Perhaps he would live the rest of his life with nothing but memories of those 12 impossible days. But Marcus had seen the look in Velith's eyes when she made her promise, and something told him that she had meant every word. So he waited, and he worked, and he watched the sky. And 18 days after Velith left his cabin, the sky lit up once again. The light that filled the sky on the 18th night was different from before, brighter and more beautiful, like a second sun had risen in the darkness. Marcus stumbled out of his cabin wearing nothing but his sleeping clothes and boots he had barely managed to pull on. He stared upward with his mouth hanging open as not one, but 3 massive ships descended through the clouds, their hulls gleaming with lights of every color. The largest ship was enormous, bigger than any building Marcus had ever seen, and banners of shimmering fabric streamed from its sides like the flags of some ancient royal procession. This was not a rescue vessel, Marcus realized with growing shock. This was something else entirely. He was still standing there in the snow when the ships landed in the wide field behind his cabin, their engines sending waves of warm air across the frozen landscape. Ramps lowered from the vessels with smooth mechanical grace, and figures began to emerge into the night. They were soldiers like the ones who had come before, but these wore ceremonial armor that sparkled with embedded jewels and flowing capes. There were beings in elaborate robes, covered with symbols that glowed and shifted like living things. And there, walking down the main ramp of the largest ship, was Velith. She looked nothing like the injured woman he had found in the snow. Her silver skin gleamed with health, and her markings shone bright and strong like rivers of blue fire running across her body. She wore robes of deep purple that flowed around her like liquid, and her long dark hair was arranged in complex patterns, held by pins that glittered like stars. Behind her walked an older Karathi male, tall and stern, with markings that burned so bright they were almost painful to look at. His robes were even more elaborate than Valeth's, covered with symbols that Marcus somehow understood meant power and authority. Beyond anything he could imagine, guards flanked them on all sides, and advisors and servants trailed behind like the tail of a comet. Marcus looked down at himself, at his worn sleeping clothes and his unlaced boots, and he almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. Here was what appeared to be alien royalty descending on his cabin, and he looked like he had just rolled out of bed, because he had in fact just rolled out of bed. Valeth approached him across the snow, and though her face was formal and composed, he could see warmth in her dark eyes. "Marcus, Chun of Earth," she said in a voice that carried across the cold air. "I told you that a Sindara always balances the ledger." The older male stepped forward to stand beside Valeth, and up close Marcus could see the family resemblance in the shape of their faces and the pattern of their glowing marks. "So this is the human," the male said, his voice deep and resonant like distant thunder. "The one who saved my daughter, asking nothing in return." Marcus swallowed hard and tried to find his voice. "I'm Marcus," he managed to say. "You must be Valeth's father, sir. It's nice to meet you." The formal Karathi greeting he attempted felt clumsy on his tongue, but Valeth's father looked at him with something that might have been amusement. "I am High Sindara Vorath," he said. "I control the trading rights for a quarter of known space. I have negotiated with emperors and warlords and beings who could destroy worlds with a thought." He paused and studied Marcus with intense silver eyes. "And yet my daughter tells me that you, a single being on an unknown world, have done something that all my wealth and power could not. You showed her pure kindness with no price attached." Marcus shifted uncomfortably under the weight of that gaze. "I just did what anyone would do," he said. "She was hurt and needed help. It wasn't complicated." Vorath exchanged a look with his daughter, and something passed between them that Marcus could not read. "That," Vorath said slowly, "is exactly what makes it so remarkable among the Karathi. No one does anything without calculating the cost and the benefit. Every kindness is a debt. Every gift is a contract. This is how we have survived for 10,000 years." He shook his head slowly, his bright markings dimming slightly as if in deep thought. "But my daughter has returned from this ghost world with strange ideas. She speaks of kindness without payment, of helping strangers simply because they need help. My advisors think she has lost her mind." Valeth stepped forward before Marcus could respond. "I have not lost my mind, Father," she said firmly. "I have gained something that our people forgot long ago. Marcus taught me that there is another way to live, a way that does not measure everything in debt and payment." She turned to face Marcus, and then to his shock, she lowered herself to one knee before him. Gasps of disbelief rose from the assembled Karathi behind her, advisors and soldiers and servants all staring in horror as a daughter of the High Sindara knelt before an alien. "Valeth, what are you doing?" Vorath demanded, his voice sharp with surprise. "I am invoking the old law," Valeth replied without rising. "The law of unpayable debt. When a Karathi receives a gift that cannot be valued, the debt must be balanced with a gift of equal impossibility." She looked up at Marcus with those dark eyes he had come to know so well. "You gave me my life without price," she said. "So I will give your people something they do not yet know they need. Something that has no price because it is beyond all value." She rose gracefully and turned to her father, who was watching with an expression of grudging respect. "I invoke my right as a Sindara to offer a world the protection of our house," she announced. "Earth will become our ally, bound not by contract or debt, but by gift freely given. Varath was silent for a long moment, his stern face unreadable. "You understand what you are proposing," he said finally. "A gift of this magnitude has not been given in 1,000 years. It will change everything for these humans." Velith nodded without hesitation. "That is exactly why it must be done," she said. "Marcus showed me that the greatest strength is not power or wealth, but the courage to help others without expecting anything in return. The galaxy has forgotten this truth, and perhaps it is time we remembered." Marcus stood in the snow surrounded by alien beings of incredible power, feeling very small and very confused. "I'm sorry," he said, "but what exactly is happening here?" Velith smiled at him, and it was the same smile she had given him in his cabin when she finally understood what he had been trying to teach her. "I am giving humanity a gift." "Marcus," she said, "the same kind of gift you gave me." She reached into her robes and produced a tablet of crystal that glowed with inner light, covered in symbols that shifted and changed as he watched. "This is the Sindara Compact," she explained. "It offers Earth formal alliance with my people, access to our technology and our star maps and our markets, and most importantly, protection under Karathi law." She held the tablet out to him, and the weight of the moment pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. "Anyone who threatens your world will answer to the Sindara." Velith continued, "Your people will no longer be alone and defenseless in a dangerous galaxy. You will have friends among the stars." Marcus looked at the glowing tablet in her hands, then at the vast ships behind her, then at the assembled crowd of powerful alien beings who were all watching him with expressions of curiosity and disbelief. "This seems like a lot," he said weakly. "I mean, I just fixed your leg. I'm not sure that deserves all this." Varath let out a sound that might have been laughter. "My daughter said you would react this way," he said. "She told me that you would not understand why your small kindness matters. But I am beginning to see what she means." He moved closer to Marcus, and his towering presence was both intimidating and strangely warm. "You saved my daughter because she needed saving," Varath said, "not because of who she was or what she could offer you. You did not know she was the daughter of a high Sindara. You thought she was just a wounded stranger in need of help." He placed his large silver hand on Marcus's shoulder. "In all my years of ruling, I have never encountered such a thing, and I find myself moved by it in ways I did not expect. Perhaps there is wisdom in my daughter's strange ideas after all." Marcus looked at Velith, who was watching him with hope and affection in her eyes. "You really want to do this?" he asked her. "Give all of this to a planet full of people you have never met, just because one of them helped you?" Velith nodded without hesitation. "Today she said softly, using the words he had taught her. "Tomorrow humanity. That is how this works, yes?" Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes, though he would not let them fall in front of all these watching strangers. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's how it works." He reached out and took the crystal tablet from her hands, and as his fingers closed around it, he felt a warmth spread through his body like the first rays of spring sun after a long winter. The assembled Karathi burst into a sound that might have been applause. Though it was unlike any sound Marcus had ever heard, Velith stepped forward and placed her hand over his heart once more, just as she had done when she left 18 days ago. "The debt is balanced," she whispered. "But I hope this is only the beginning." Marcus looked at the tablet in his hands, then at the alien woman who had become his friend, then at the stars above that now seemed so much closer than they ever had before. "Yeah," he said with a smile. "I hope so too." And somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled at the strange lights in the sky, not knowing that the world had just changed forever. The hours that followed were the strangest of Marcus Chun's entire life. and he had already experienced several very strange days since Velith crashed into his world. Karathi had set up elaborate tents in the field near his cabin, structures made of fabric that seemed to generate their own warmth and light inside the largest tent. Marcus sat at a table across from Hysindara Varth and a dozen advisors who studied him like he was some exotic creature they had never seen before. Velith sat beside him, her presence a comfort in this sea of powerful strangers. "Let me make certain I understand," Varth said, leaning forward with his bright markings pulsing thoughtfully. "You want nothing for yourself in this arrangement. No wealth, no position, no special status among your own people." Marcus shook his head, feeling uncomfortable with the attention. "I'm a wildlife veterinarian," he said. "I study wolves and bears. I help animals when they get hurt. That's what I do, and that's what I want to keep doing." One of the advisors made a sound of disbelief. "You could have anything," she said, her silver face tight with confusion. "You could rule your entire world with the technology we would provide. You could become the most powerful human in existence. And you want to continue caring for primitive animals?" Marcus thought about the question seriously before he answered. "Those animals need me," he said simply. "Not many people are willing to live out here in the middle of nowhere and do this work. If I leave, who will help them?" Velith placed her cool hand on his arm and looked at the advisor with firm eyes. "This is exactly what I have been trying to explain," she said. "Marcus does not measure value the way we do. To him, the worth of a life is not determined by what it can offer in return." Vorath stroked his chin thoughtfully, a gesture that seemed very human despite his alien appearance. "I have ruled the Sindara for 200 years, he said slowly. "I have negotiated treaties with empires and forged alliances with warrior races. I have acquired wealth beyond measure and power that spans a quarter of the galaxy." He paused and looked at Marcus with something like wonder in his ancient eyes. "And yet I have never met anyone quite like you," he admitted. "You possess something that all my wealth cannot buy. A peace with yourself and your purpose that I find quite remarkable." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion outside the tent drew everyone's attention. The fabric walls rippled as someone pushed through the entrance, and Marcus turned to see his mother standing there, her hair wild and her eyes wide with shock. Behind her stood two Karathi soldiers who looked uncertain about what to do with this human woman who had somehow arrived without warning. "Marcus James Chun," his mother said in the tone she had used when he was a child caught doing something wrong. "Would you please explain to me why there are alien spaceships parked in your backyard, and why men in silver skin showed up at my house in California to fly me here in some kind of magical aircraft?" Marcus stood up so quickly that his chair fell over behind him. "Mom?" he said, his voice cracking with surprise. "What are you doing here?" His mother crossed her arms and fixed him with the look that had terrified him since childhood. "What am I doing here?" she repeated. "What are you doing here, young man? With aliens and spaceships and crystal tablets and whatever else is going on in this madness." Velith rose gracefully and approached Marcus's mother with a formal bow. "Mrs. Chun," she said in perfect English, "I am Velith Sindara. Your son saved my life, and I have come to repay that debt." Marcus's mother looked at Velith, then at the elaborate tent around her, then at the assembled Karathi dignitaries, and then back at her son. "You saved her life?" she asked. Marcus. He nodded, feeling suddenly like a teenager again under his mother's questioning gaze. "She crashed in the snow," he explained. "Her leg was broken and she was bleeding. I couldn't just leave her there." His mother's expression softened slightly, though she still looked overwhelmed by everything around her. "No," she said quietly. "I suppose you couldn't. You always were too kind for your own good. Just like your grandfather." Vorath cleared his throat politely. "Mrs. Chun," he said, "I understand this must be confusing, Perhaps you would allow me to explain what is happening here." What followed was the most surreal hour of Marcus's life. Watching his mother sit down with the High Sindara himself and listen as he explained everything he told her about the galaxy full of intelligent species, about the Karathi trading empire, about the dangers that lurked in the dark spaces between stars, and he told her about how her son had done something that had never been done before. Shown pure kindness to a stranger from another world without expecting anything in return. "Your son has given my daughter a gift that cannot be measured," Vorath concluded. "And in our culture, such a gift must be repaid with something equally immeasurable. That is why we are offering Earth a place among the stars." Marcus's mother was silent for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. Then she looked at Marcus with tears in her eyes. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you," she said softly. "He always said that the way you treat strangers shows who you really are." She turned to Vorath with a composure that surprised. "Marcus, I may not understand all of this," she said, "but I understand kindness. And I understand that my son did a good thing, whatever comes next. I am proud of him." Vorath bowed his head respectfully. "You have raised a remarkable son, Mrs. Chun," he said. "The galaxy will benefit from knowing humans like him." As dawn began to break over the Alaskan mountains, the Karathi prepared for their departure. Vorath walked with Marcus to the edge of the field where his cabin stood. The two of them alone for the first time since her return. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, watching the alien ships power up their engines in the distance. Evleth looked at him with those dark eyes that had become so familiar to him. "Now, everything changes," she said. "My people will send ambassadors to your world, scholars to study your cultures, merchants to establish trade. It will not happen all at once, but slowly your people will become part of something larger." She smiled, and her glowing markings pulsed with warm colors. "And I will come back," she promised. "Often, I think, there is much I still want to learn about your world. And about you." Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the rising sun. "I'd like that," he admitted. "It's going to be strange here without an alien patient to take care of." Vorath laughed, a sound like wind chimes that Marcus had come to love. "I am sure you will find other creatures to heal," she said. "That seems to be your purpose, caring for those who cannot care for themselves." She reached up and touched his face with her cool silver fingers. "The galaxy is vast and often cruel," she said softly. "But perhaps your people can teach us to be better. Perhaps the lesson you taught me, today you tomorrow me, will spread to other worlds and other species." Marcus caught her hand and held it gently. "That's a lot of pressure for one veterinarian," he said with a smile. Evleth shook her head. "Not just you," she said. "All of you kind. I have read about your history in the data we gathered. Your species has done terrible things to each other. Wars and cruelties and horrors that rival anything in our archives." She stepped closer, her dark eyes intent on his. "But you have also done beautiful things," she continued. "You have shown compassion to strangers, sacrificed yourselves for others, built communities based on mutual aid and shared kindness, that capacity for both darkness and light. That is what makes humanity so fascinating." She pressed her hand over his heart one final time. "And that is why I believe you will change the galaxy," she said. "Not through war or conquest, but through something far more powerful. Through the simple act of helping those who need help, behind them." Vorath called out something in the Karathi language. Evleth turned and responded, then looked back at Marcus with reluctance. "I must go," she said. "But I will return. This I promise." Marcus nodded. Not trusting himself to speak, he watched as she walked toward the waiting ships, her purple robes flowing in the morning breeze at the ramp of the largest vessel. She turned and raised her hand in farewell, and Marcus raised his hand in return. Then she disappeared inside. And moments later the ships rose into the sky like ascending gods. Their engines filling the air with thunder. Marcus stood in the snow watching until they vanished among the stars, leaving behind only the cold wind and the empty field. His mother came to stand beside him, her arm wrapping around his waist like she used to do when he was a boy. "That was quite something," she said. Marcus laughed, the sound a little shaky. "Yeah," he agreed. "It really was." They stood together in silence for a long moment, watching the sky where the ships had disappeared. "What are you going to do now?" his mother asked. Marcus thought about the question, about the crystal tablet in his cabin and the alliance it represented, about the galaxy full of wonders and dangers waiting beyond Earth's sky. Then he looked at the forest where his wolves lived, at the mountains where he had spent 3 years doing work that he loved. "I think I'm going to check my traps," he said. "There might be an animal out there that needs help." His mother smiled and squeezed his hand. "That sounds like you," she said. Marcus returned to his cabin and pulled on his warm clothes and his boots, and he set out into the wilderness with his medical bag over his shoulder. The world had changed forever. Humanity was no longer alone, and somewhere in the stars, a silver-skinned woman was carrying his lesson too.